If we're going to do this thing, let's do it properly.
I just allow Google find devices, I guess, or no. When they ask for permission, I sometimes say, and if they have to ask for permission, maybe they
Mm.
shouldn't get it.
Ah,
So how you doing? Uh,
yeah, I'm doing great.
You
So,
look
David,
great.
so do you.
Well, thank you.
How old are you now?
Well, I'm sorry you asked that question, although I was going to bring it up. I'm 79, so this year I have a momentous birthday.
Wow.
December 26th, I'll turn 80.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I say.
You're looking
Well,
good.
thank you. And I generally feel good. I get the assorted aches and pains, uh, the, the occasional senior moment, although not really too much of those, I'm happy to say. I seem to be, surviving that okay. My voice is a little hoarse these days. Is probably not the best timing for this, but I'm keeping busy, and that's what we'll probably talk about later on. But and I'm staying in good shape. I at one point I had walked over 3 years, closing my move ring, my Apple Watch six, yeah, for three every day for over 3 years. And I went to a nonstop flight to Japan, and that wiped me out. I didn't have a chance to really get the walk in, so I broke the streak. But I still walk a lot. I'm not doing the kung fu or whatever it is you're doing, but I still do get my walks in, and that's good. I always joke that a few years ago I was seeing a young professional woman, on a regular basis, and Edna was, not real happy about it, but what can you do? And then one day the young woman said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see you anymore." And normally that would be cause for alarm if you're a guy, but happens she was my cardiologist, and she, after 2 years of testing, because I had some symptom which we think was just a muscle pull, they decided my heart was fine and I didn't need to keep doing this. So that was good news.
But you were going to say she was your proctologist, but okay.
Oh, I wouldn't want.
You're still seeing her.
Right, right. I would feel bad for anyone who had to be that.
So it turns out you can survive into old age on a diet of whiskey.
Yeah, well, speaking of young women, I'm cavorting with an 18-year-old right now. That would be my medication, which is 18 years old.
Hmm.
No, normally I wouldn't take a dose of medication quite this early, but in keeping with our grand tradition, I thought it might be appropriate.
You thought you probably would need it in order to talk to
Well,
me and
yeah, if I'm
get
going to
through
have
the
to
night.
put up an hour and a half or so of camera, I better be well fortified. And by the way, how's Chrissy and Fox doing?
They're doing great. Chrissy's still asleep, although I did ask her to set an alarm for 7 a.m., which it's just clicked over, so she'll probably be up getting Fox ready to go to Kung Fu in an hour.
Kung Fu, that's right.
Yeah, they're doing great. Fox is 11
Oh my God.
and doing 3 or 4 classes of Kung Fu a week. He's getting ready for another grading in about a month. He's excited about that. But yeah, no, he's doing great. We're all doing great. My older boys are nearly 25. One lives in LA now. He moved to LA at the beginning of the year. He said he was going for 2 weeks and would be back, and it's been 6 months now. And he says, I'm paying 4 grand a month rent here. I can't afford to come back.
What I can't understand,
Um,
how the hell did Fox get to be 11? And
yeah,
it
right.
just boggles the
He,
mind.
he I got up this morning and he said, "Why are you up so early?" I said, "I'm doing a podcast." I said, "Actually, it's with the guy that introduced Mummy and I." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I've heard about that guy."
I deny everything. No, I
Yeah.
if I had if I
Um,
had to make a list of things that I did that turned out to be good things, that would be near
mm.
the top of the list.
Oh, that would be on that list.
Oh,
I was.
absolutely. Getting you two together and the good life you've had together, and Fox, who's, from everything I can tell, is just an amazing kid. I only had the one chance, I think, to meet him when he was much, much, much younger, but I follow him with great joy.
I've got a photo on my desktop here that I want to share with you. So give you an idea of how Chris is doing.
Oh my. That's I wouldn't want to get into an argument with her. That's for sure.
That's that's kind of what she looks like now after 4 years of kung fu.
Jeez.
She's become an absolute beast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you'd best be aware of that when she asks you to do something.
she does. She plays violin by day and then beats me up at night.
Yes,
Um,
I can believe it.
so I was telling you via email that next year will be the 20 years since we started the Napoleon show.
That's also amazing.
It is, yeah, it
I
really
think you
is.
said in February, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think in February it'll be the 20th anniversary of the Napoleon show. But so let's catch up on your news. So I know that you've got this Caesar book, but on the Napoleon front, what have you been doing? Have you got new Napoleon books? Is there any new news? Have they discovered Napoleon yet? Have they opened the tomb yet?
Well, no, they
What's
haven't.
the
They
what's
haven't done that.
Napoleon news?
I'll mention the Caesar book first, just to get that out of the way. It's not out yet. It's coming out at the end of September. It's called Simply Caesar, and it's in the same series of books that a few years ago that me and Matthew Zarzinski co-authored on Simply Napoleon. This is, the second of the series, and there's at least some possibility that we will end up doing Simply Alexander the Great. We'll have to wait and see. But that's coming soon to a website near you. As far as Napoleon, I've kept quite busy with Napoleon, and I have to say, first of all, that I want to wish you and yours a happy Napoleonic birthday. Today is, after all, the 15th of August. And I want to wish a happy birthday to my ex-wife Barbara, who her 78th birthday is today. And all the years we were together, I always had to be careful to toast her before I toast the emperor. But so
Hmm.
happy birthday, Barbara.
Happy birthday, Barbara.
Yeah, we just had a great International Napoleonic Society in Levallois, which is a near suburb of Paris, a very nice suburb, beautiful hotel, the Evergreen Hotel. And some of the evenings we went into Paris to see some of the sights, and then we had tours for the last 3 days. The mayor of the city gave me the medal of the city, which was always nice. And then we went to Montmartre, which is where Joseph Bonaparte's chateau was, and still is, although it doesn't look all that much like it they used to. And the mayor gave a reception for us there, and we had inaugurated a plaque, a large plaque on the front wall of City Hall, commemorating some of the work that Joseph did diplomatically between France and the United States. And then and this was fabulous. They had this group of guys come in who capture, I guess is the word, uh, birds that have been disabled and have suffered injury or whatever in the wild, hawks and eagles and that sort of thing. And then they rehabilitate them. And then I was selected to be the one to release a hawk that was now fully recovered into the wild, and it had a shield over its eye, so it was quite calm. But the guy told me when he takes the shield off, I've got about 1 second if I want to live to get the bird up into the air. And so I'm still here, so I guess I did it pretty well. But that was really quite something. It's a wonderful program that they have, and I've never been able to do something like that before, and it's totally unexpected. Nothing to do with Napoleon. But for whatever reason, the mayor thought that would be nice to do because we had a very large crowd there, and so on. Uh, and then in November, we've got the next Napoleonic Historical Society meeting, and we've got some good speakers already coming for that. I'll talk about one in a minute. And that's in San Diego. And It's a deep blue state, Democratic state. So I guess I'll go. I'm like a lot of people, even though I'm a citizen of the U.S. I get slightly nervous about going. Given if you read my comments on Trump on Facebook, that there might be a ICE agent waiting to have a little discussion with me. But all kidding aside, I'm looking forward to that. I love San Diego, the city, and next year we're going to be in Bavaria and in Regensburg. Excuse my grabbing here. Uh, which is a very well-known Napoleonic city, and there's all sorts of things to do there. And so that'll be next July, and it should be good. And we just had our 22nd, International Napoleonic Society Congress, and I've organized all of them. I've been doing it for almost 30 years now, which is also kind of mind-boggling. But I'm already thinking about the 25th and where we'll have it, because I'd like obviously to make that something exceedingly special, uh, and then go on from there. So I keep busy, but they say keeping busy keeps you out of trouble, and that would probably take exception to that statement, but I certainly enjoy it, and it does keep me active, and a lot of my friends, including you, are through my Napoleonic activities, and I look forward to seeing them in person, once or twice a year, and I always look forward to the chance to chat with you and for once actually get to see your smiling face there. In the old days, we didn't do video because it took up so much bandwidth or whatever. But
Yeah.
now apparently that's all changed, and I wish I'd known. I could have looked a little bit better for my adoring fans out there, but what can I say? Too late now.
Mm. Mhm.
Cheers.
So, in terms of Napoleonic um, news, how's Napoleon doing? Like the Ridley Scott film came out probably a couple of years ago now, which we weren't happy about at the time.
No,
And I have not gone back to watch it again. Like I've even the director's cut, I've stayed away from. I just can't
I promised
bring
myself that I
myself to.
would, but like you, it's not necessarily something that I want to put myself through. And although there's always, hope springs eternal, Cameron. There's always the chance that they close some of the holes and gaps, transitions that didn't make any sense. How do you get from here to there? And by the way, what about the 3 years in between, and so forth? So there's always the possibility that it can be improved, maybe not made good, but at least improved. And so maybe sometime when I have plenty of time and plenty of scotch on my hands, maybe I will make the grand effort. The good part about it is, unlike in a movie theater, if you get tired of it, or oh, come on, I can't take any more. I'll watch some more tomorrow night. You can just put it on pause, and then come back to it.
So my question was going to be in Napoleonic circles, what has been the response generally from what you've heard to the film? And second part is, did the film do any good for Napoleonic awareness on the global stage, or was it negative or neutral? People show more or less interest in Napoleon as a result of Ridley's
Well, the,
film.
the first part of your question is the easy part. I have yet to talk to any Napoleonic scholar or aficionado, any of my friends, anyone that maybe I meet for the first time, that has anything truly good to say about the movie. Now, you may recall I pointed out there were some good things. The first part of the movie, going through the revolution and stuff, actually wasn't bad, and they used legitimate music from the period, and it began to make me think, well, maybe this isn't going to be so terrible. And then it hit the fan, and it never recovered. Uh,
Mm.
so I've heard people say more or less what I say, and some of them even more negative than I am, and I'm pretty negative on the movie. Uh, as far as the second part of the question, uh, that's a little more difficult to answer because, technically that would require some polling of some kind, even at the conference, raise your hands if you more favorable toward Napoleon or less, but the people who were at the Congress are already, for the most part, favorable toward Napoleon and had been for some time based on the research and the readings and so forth. And so one bad movie is probably not going to change their opinion very much. They're more likely to blame the movie than to blame the emperor. I would
Hmm.
have to say though that just as a matter of logic, that it would certainly increase interest in Napoleon amongst the non-Napoleonic scholars, amongst the general public, if you will. It was like Gladiator and other movies before. It was meant to be for average people, not for historians as such. And I think, and I have seen some information on this, that people who didn't know a lot about Napoleon, who saw that movie, probably didn't have as bad an opinion of the movie and therefore of Napoleon uh, as people like us who know where the big mistakes in the movie were made and it drives us crazy. Uh, so I'm going to guess overall it probably certainly increased interest in Napoleon because it got a lot of publicity. At Ridley Scott and Joaquin Phoenix, these are big names, and because of the controversy and a lot of people writing and talking about it, uh, I'm going to guess it was an overall plus, not among historians but among the general populace. That just would be my feeling. I don't think they would even see some of the awful things like the firing cannons at the pyramids, which was one of the most absurd things in the movie. I think they probably wouldn't even think that much about that.
No major uptick in book sales or interest from publishers or anything like that. Hey, the public are really chomping at the bit for more information about Napoleon. The 5,000 books that have been written about him over the last 100 years isn't enough. We need another 5,000. Get onto it, Markham.
Well, funny you should mention it. I've got coming up here on Napoleon. I've got one, two, three, four, five, six books that are either done or are in progress. For example, I Jonas Deneuf, who was well known now for his tremendous work in uh, uh, translating memoirs and letters and other kinds of things from using Napoleonic soldiers. He did a book called "To Scourge, Sweat, and Suffer for Napoleon: Eyewitness Accounts of the French and French allied officers and soldiers during the Peninsular War." And that's actually been out for a couple of months now. You can get it on Lulu, you can get it on Amazon. I wrote the introduction for that, and I have no idea how well it's selling. Uh, I have a book coming out. It's already out on Lulu, which is a self-publishing site, and it will be available on Barnes and Noble and Amazon within the next 2 or 3 weeks at the latest, I think. And that's called Echoes of Empire, Coachman Jean Horn's account, 1815 documents, and some lives of Napoleon St. Helena servants. It's basically he translated a lot of French stuff, and I provided a transcript of John Horn, who was his coachman and traveled all over Europe with Napoleon and wrote a memoir, which is actually quite interesting to read. And then he ended up, Napoleon's coach. He was Napoleon's coach at Waterloo, and the coach ended up going to London, at least for some time. and they brought John Horn over and had him give tours and lectures and so forth, which was,
Wow.
kind of interesting. So it's a it's an interesting book. It's been many years since it was published. It is on Google Books somewhere, but this will be coming out pretty soon. And I, of course, urge people to buy a book like that in particular, and Jonas's books as well, would be good for libraries. So if you have a university, a college library in town, or even the public library, uh, if you were to, it is not that much money, buy one of these books and put them in a library, so more people have access to them for free. That's a pretty good thing to do. Uh, and I got to tell you a story of another book that's coming out. I just wrote the intro for this, but I was born, I don't know if you know this, I was born in Waterloo, Texas, which is what
No, I didn't know that.
that's what
Brilliant.
I was born in Austin, Texas, but its first name was Waterloo,
Oh,
Texas.
wow.
And then when it became the capital, they changed the name to being after Stephen F. Austin. Uh, Little did I know until recent.
That's the Bionic Man, Steve Austin,
No, no,
the $6 million man.
no,
They named it after
no,
him.
not
Oh,
wrong
okay.
Austin.
That's a
Yeah,
shame.
I know. Well, time travel wasn't available for him. But uh, little did I know that I eventually moved to and went to high school and university at Napoleon, Iowa. Because in my sophomore year in high school, had been living in State College, Pennsylvania. My family, due to my dad getting a job at the University of Iowa teaching journalism, we moved to Iowa City, Iowa. And all the years I was there, I did not know this initial name had been Napoleon, Iowa. And so
Wow.
Edna actually came across this woman, Anna Barker, who's a professor at the University of Iowa. And then she and I got in touch, and we've done some collaboration. I wrote I think, a very nice introduction to her book, telling the story of the Iowa connection, because there's a Waterloo, Iowa, there's a Marengo, Iowa, there's all sorts of Napoleonic names, and apparently it came very close to being incorporated into the French Empire. When it's hard to say, but uh, so she tells a very fascinating story about that, and then goes around the world going to sites and talking about them. It's an absolutely wonderful book. It's called 13 Notes from Napoleon, Iowa, Muses on the Edge of the French Empire. Her name is Anna Barker, and it's absolutely amazing. So it's it's kind of coming full circle on this, because you know I was born in Waterloo, Texas, and ended up for a big part of a very important part of my life in Napoleon, Iowa. And then my second degree, my first master's degree, was just outside of Waterloo, Iowa. So there's connections there. Uh, One big one of which I only learned about this year, so that was quite amazing. And there's actually a Napoleon Park in Iowa City, which I did not know of either, which is amazing. But my interest in Napoleon wasn't quite as high in high school and undergraduate college. It was always there, but it was
Now,
never at the level that it is
how,
now.
when and how did you get interested in Napoleon? I don't think I know that story.
Well, I thought maybe I'd tell it to you, but when I was a kid,
Probably.
yeah, when I was a kid, my father would tell me stories about Napoleon and Alexander and Caesar and some others, but those three in particular stuck, and Napoleon stuck most of all. So, I was always sort of looking around for anything to do with Napoleon, and I would go to a museum and there was a painting there. Oh, well, we got to go over there to see that, that kind of thing. Uh, and and I took a class, a university graduate school class at Arizona State, And by then I had gone to Europe a few times with Barbara and had discovered all the wonderful Napoleonic stuff there. And also had discovered that you could buy Napoleonic antiques, including some that were small, like my snuff box collection, that you could take home easily and you could actually afford. They weren't super expensive. So I was much more into Napoleon at that point. I was a member president at one point of the Alliance Française in Phoenix. Uh, so at Arizona State, I took this class on the French Revolution and Napoleon. It was taught by a very good well, middle-aged woman professor who was an adjunct professor, if I recall. And I had to write a paper for the thing, of course, to get graduate credit. And she liked the paper, and she said, "Well, maybe a tweak here or there, and a small stuff. Maybe you should submit it to a history magazine of some kind." So I did that. I submitted it to Military History Illustrated, which was a pretty big deal, glossy, full color magazine in those days, and it was accepted as one of their smaller articles, a lead in to the thing, and it was on Napoleon and the French Revolution, of course. And then the publisher of that magazine contacted me and said, because it took over a year to get this thing into print. Well, there's this guy who's doing a biography of Napoleon, each chapter written by somebody different. And would you be interested? I could get you in touch, and maybe you'd like to write a chapter for them. Well, I ended up writing the first and the last chapters. I ended up writing a chapter on his rise to power, and a chapter on the 100 Days in his St. Helena, basically, and his legacy. Uh, and so that was called Napoleon: The Final Verdict. This is in the 1990s. And then that publisher said, "Well, we know somebody else here who would like uh, to have someone write a good standalone biography of Napoleon. And would you be interested in that?" Well, yeah.
So,
That
so this was quite late in life. You were like middle-aged when you
yeah,
started writing about
yeah.
Napoleon.
This would have been in the mid 90s. So, let's see, that would make me 45 years old or something along that line.
And we started in 2006, so it was only a decade before we started doing the show that
Yeah,
you started doing this.
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It was in the,
How old?
it
So,
was in the,
how old would you have been in 2006?
well, it was in the 80s that I started really getting into Napoleon collecting, but it was in the late 80s and early to mid 90s that the writing stuff began. The paper was published in 89, and then it was after this, so 90, 92, 96, and so on. Well, let's see. I would, if you,
You would have been 59.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I suppose so.
yeah,
You
yeah.
better,
I'll be 55 this year, so you're only a few years older than I am now.
well then, but
That's
now I'm a lot older than you, of course. You're,
No, it's just funny because, just to think that you were around about my age when we started the show.
yeah, yeah, that's really quite something. But so anyway, there's that book. I've got another book that I actually was working with a publisher, but it seems to have stalled a little bit. Called Napoleon's Guns and Artists in Egypt, which is the journals of Alexander Berthier and Charles Norrie. Uh, I'm working on a book just beginning, documents from the 100 Days, posters, proclamation accounts, and the Bulletin of Laws, just to give an idea of what kind of things were being done officially, if you will, during Napoleon's 100 Days. Uh, and then I've got a biography of Napoleon that I want to do. It's a major revision and expansion of the first biography that I did, Napoleon's Road to Glory, back in the 90s, the one I just was mentioning. And in the meantime, I've had some translations done. The Road to St. Helena, which is a book I'm very proud of, has been translated into Spanish. It'll be coming out any old day now in Polish, and it should come off this year in Romanian as well. So It's kind of nice to see things in different languages. But like I say, it keeps me busy. Keeps me busy. I say People say, "Well, what do you have a job?" Oh, I'm retired, but I don't necessarily. Other than I do sleep in a little bit, I will admit that I stay up late, and so in the old days I would stay up late to write, and then I'd still have to get up and go to school to teach. If I stay up late, I can sleep in a little bit to make up for it, and my body appreciates that very much. But I do keep busy.
You think like and my older boys sometimes ask me because of all of the history shows that I do, like what what does it matter? History. Why do you care? Why does anyone care about history? And I always struggle to answer that. I mean, I can answer it from my own perspective. I'm just interested in understanding history and how did we get here? What were the stories that got us to this point, and what can we learn from that and use it to help try and better understand what's happening today and what might be happening in the future? Because I argue that human motivations and ambitions haven't changed a great deal over recorded
I
history.
agree.
We have different kinds of technology now, but basically we're still the same. But in terms of your lifetime devotion to Napoleon, what do you think? What's the point, apart from your own enjoyment of the subject matter? What's the point of the promotion of Napoleon?
Well, I mean, as you seem to have suggested, there's kind of two sides to that, two different things, ways of answering it. One is that you want to do in life things that give you enjoyment and also give you a sense of fulfillment and maybe of accomplishing something. And I was fortunate that much of my life, although I had all sorts of different jobs in and out of government, I owned a photography studio and so forth, but for a big chunk of my life, almost 20 years, 17 or 18 years, I was teaching. I mean, high school, community college, university, and I loved it. And so I was doing something that I thought was good for people, and also something that I really truly enjoyed. And I have my students have always spoken very highly of me, and including in later years and so on. I still have contacts with some. And in a sense, Napoleon's the same way. I find him to be fascinating, as I find other people in the history to be fascinating. Like I said, I just wrote a book or co-authored a book on Caesar, and maybe have one coming on Alexander. Uh, and I like history in general. Uh, but yeah, I enjoy reading about Napoleon and writing about Napoleon, collecting. My God, when you were here a million years ago, you did this 19-minute video, sort of walking around, hearing me talk about what the collection, is all about and what I have, and you wouldn't recognize the place now. I mean, it may have seemed like there was a lot of stuff when you were here, but my collecting is. I keep thinking I've got to stop. I don't. I have an enormous statue that I bought in Ajaccio, and it'll be shipped next week. I have no idea where I'm going to put it. I'll find a space. I tell Ed, I'll put it in your bedside table. Oh, no, but and she wanted to get it too, but we neither one really know yet where it's going to go. But I've got a few possible. I mean, it's a mammoth thing, and I've been collecting snuff boxes. I've got 330 or 40, Napoleonic snuff boxes. I've got over 100 miniature paintings that you see, and it's it's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of history, and I hope to get them into a museum someday. Uh, but back to what's the point? Other than my self enjoyment, I think that much like teaching, if I can, if I can bring that fascinating story to more people's attention and give them more opportunities to understand that part of our common history, then I think I'm doing something good. And to take it a step further, and something you also alluded to, and I know you will agree with me, those who do not learn history are condemned to repeat it, or something along that line. And that's so very true. And we see that now. I mean, people like you and I who are historians can look at what's happening in various parts of the world, and we can see that the same damn thing happened, and in some cases not that long ago, and yet people don't seem to recognize at least the possibility of the direction that much of the world, including the United States, is heading in. So history is important from that standpoint, and so that's another reason we need historians, is to alert people to both the possibilities, because a lot of history is good. There's a lot of good things happen in history, a lot of good people in history, including, I would argue, Napoleon and others. Uh, but there's also a lot of bad people and a lot of bad motives, and a lot of bad things have happened. And sometimes they happen in the same old way, and it's like, when will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Really. And you've seen my Facebook page, although you never really respond to them much or anything, but I'm sure you've seen them. Uh, I have very strong opinions about the direction of politics in the U.S., and to a lesser extent in some parts, at least, of Canada. And so I use that forum, Facebook, to continue my education project, if you will. Uh, but
Chrissy, Chrissy bans me from responding to any of your Facebook posts. She's like, leave David alone.
well, I would think that a lot of times you would hit a like button, because I think, when it comes to something, I know we disagree on some American history and American politics, but I think we probably agree more on one particular person, in in particular, than we disagree. But I don't, the thing about you, Cameron, that I like, and you're hardly alone, but you're in an elite class. I can disagree with you, and we can have a civil conversation. We may each roll our eyes a little bit, but we can have a civil conversation, and we usually will find some common ground on something. And even if we don't, okay, that's Cameron being Cameron, that's David being David, and life goes on, and our friendship goes on. And I've got a few other people like that, but it's so much of today is marked by just the opposite. If you don't agree with me, you must be a complete fool and moron, and why am I wasting my time with you? And that's not
See, I think
that's not a good path forward.
that's no, and I think that's a particularly American cultural attribute, because outside of the United States, I find that people generally are happy to have debates and disagreements at a purely intellectual level. It doesn't become personal. America has become, I think, over the last 30, 40 years, way more adversarial in that respect, where people can't have a polite disagreement, or, even a vehement disagreement on politics, and it's spread beyond pure politics to vaccines and all
Oh,
sorts of
yeah.
social issues, this divisiveness. Um, and that some of that has crept into Australia too. And I've been fighting against this here for decades, which I saw the increasing Americanization of Australian culture as a result of TV and film and all of that kind of stuff. But there has been, particularly sort of post QAnon, post COVID, a certain kind of fracturing and fragmentation of social cohesiveness in Australia, where people are becoming so angry at people who don't agree with their perspective on things. It's becoming slightly more difficult to have a civilized debate over things. but I don't think we're anywhere near as bad as the
Yeah.
United States has become, where it's, every time I've been back there in the last 10 years, 15 years, and I can't go back now. I don't think they let me in the country. But it it is very apparent to me that it's become increasingly toxic, the cultural atmosphere, to a point where it's becoming increasingly difficult to have an intelligent conversation with people
Well,
that doesn't end in just anger,
I wouldn't.
like deep
I
anger.
don't know that I would go quite that far. I don't know that I would make it quite as uniquely American. I think that, I on social media, I've seen people from other countries that show very similar attitudes to what we see in America. I do agree with you, however, that, and I wouldn't even go back 30 or 40 years. I think it's much more recent than that where it's really become particularly bad. Uh, I think that even though it started before Trump, I think that he's really augmented it. And I think the social isolation of the pandemic was also sort of a tipping point. I mean, it was moving in that direction, and certainly divisiveness and fragmentation and politics existed before the pandemic, before Trump. You could go back maybe to Nixon and certainly Reagan, where you started to see, people,
Mm.
you know, being less and less able to relate to each other if they had different political opinions. But I also think that, and I think you'll probably agree with this too, social media, the advent, the explosion of social media has led to the fragmentation. Because now, before, if you went online, you could go to CNN, you could go to Fox, you could go to NBC or whatever. You get newspapers, you could watch television, and and you were almost forced to be exposed to different points of view, because even a conservative outfit like Fox News would have some breadth of coverage, and occasionally they would actually have a liberal on, or whatever. But nowadays you get, One American News and Truth Social. You have even Twitter and Blue Sky splitting apart, so that Twitter is more or less left for the conservative side of things, and Blue Sky is more or less for the liberal side of things. Uh, you Facebook postings can sometimes get absolutely vehement, uh, and people are able, and I think it's more on the right, but it's on both sides to a certain extent anyway. People are able to retreat into a bubble where all of their friends believe the same thing that they do. And again, I think it's worse on the right, because they tend to more likely believe in conspiracy theories and anti-vaxxers and stuff like this, which is, very, very dangerous. When I see that, they're shutting down childhood cancer research, and they're cutting off mRNA, or whatever it is, the vaccine research, which is what helped us defeat COVID, because they were made available so quickly. You see stuff like that going on, and it's like, and who voted for that? I've got MAGA friends. I don't think any of them voted knowing that it would mean that the government would no longer fund childhood cancer research, or provide health, benefits for people, and help poor people in the world, and AIDS and research and so forth and so on. I doubt that very many people voted for that, but yeah, that's what we get. And you try to say stop. No, that's not right, and you get shut down. But the only thing we can do, Cameron, is keep trying. Is in my opinion. If you just surrender and totally withdraw, I think you are going to allow, in my opinion, the death of American democracy. And if American democracy goes down, then don't think that democracies around the world are going to be automatically safe. There's certainly MAGA elements in Canada. You seem to be suggesting there's certainly some MAGA elements, in certain areas of Australia. You know, they were once tiny and insignificant in the U.S. and they're not now. So, you know, shit happens, and we've got to try to stop it as best we can. And there's only so much I can do or you can do. You know, if Facebook reaches some people, but it's mostly most of the people who go to see what I've got to say are people who either like my Napoleonic stuff or they like my politics, and sometimes both. So I don't know how many. I know I'm getting through some because I get nasty comments, but generally speaking, I don't know how much of a bubble I'm in, whether I like it or not.
Wow, yeah. Look, I trace the history of this um, social phenomenon in the United States back to Reagan aligning
Yes.
the GOP with the religious right,
Yes.
and then Roger Ailes
Yes.
when he went to work for Rupert, figuring out how to take sort of the combination of the British tabloid newspaper media, turning that into a cable network with Fox
Yes.
to really do an extreme polarization of the media to target the religious right, Reagan era religious right. And it sort of just blew up out of that. I
I
mean,
agree.
as a
I
business
agree
strategy, you've
totally.
got to hand it to Roger
Yeah.
Ailes and Rupert. They were absolute
Oh yeah.
geniuses.
Yeah.
They really pulled it off. But that sort of what's the not yeah, the extreme
Yeah.
polarization as a business strategy led through. But the thing that fascinates me about you, David,
Uh-oh.
is a number of things that's fascinated me about you.
Now I'm in trouble.
On one hand, you consider yourself, I think, on the political left, although I always argue I don't think you're on the political left. I think you're centre right, but you think of that as the left because that's what's considered to be the left in the United States. But from our perspective, from an Australian perspective, yeah, as I always tell people, even Bernie Sanders in Australia would be considered centre right. Like he's not even on the left in our country.
Well, then
Like,
I don't know, nor do I pretend to know Australian politics that well, and certainly not at your level. But if Bernie Sanders is center right, then I
well, centrist, but with a little bit to the right. But like he's not advocating for Marxist revolution like anyone who truly on the left wants to see more genuine socialism. Bernie's sort of a bit of a corporate shill, but anyway, the you on one hand you've devoted half of your life to the study and promotion of Napoleon, who for reasons that we both understand, basically declared himself dictator of France and a military dictatorship, which most people would associate with some sort of far right element. We see articles in the media from time to time trying to compare Trump to Napoleon, which is obviously laughable.
yes.
But so you admire Napoleon, who most people consider, a military dictator. On the other hand, you consider yourself on the left. So would you like to see Napoleonic uh, uh, dictatorship in the United States?
Well, no, but times are very different. First of all, calling him a dictator is probably a little much. He actually had to be accountable to his council, and he had to be accountable to business interests and so forth. He didn't always get his way on some things, but he was emperor. He certainly did have a great deal of centralized power. And much of which, as we both understand, he used it in what we would consider a positive way. He brought freedom to the Jews. He did. He organized a better legal system. He organized a better economic and educational system. He used the power that he had to move things forward. You know, he was by the standards of the day, he was a liberal. Remember, there was no true democracy in Europe at that time. The closest would have been Great Britain, which still had a king, but the king, had to deal with a parliament and so forth. But the Russians and the Australians and the Austrians and the Spanish, they all had kings who more or less, had or emperors who more or less had total power. You know, the United States, however flawed it may be, and I know you love to talk about the flaws, and some flaws are clearly there. There's no question. But it still is a pretty good democracy. It's had free and fair elections for 240 years or so. It's coming up on 250 anniversary. Uh, it didn't start out as free and fair for everyone. We all know that. Blacks couldn't vote, women couldn't vote. You had to be a white male property owner to vote initially. But over time and relatively quickly in the scope of history, it became a much more true, exercise in democracy where essentially everyone, who was a citizen was able to vote, and elections were generally considered free and fair. Yes, moneyed interests always had more influence than they should have, and no democracy is ever likely to be free from those kinds of things. But overall, it did pretty well, and frankly, I would like to see it continue along the line that it was up until Reagan, and even some changes. I mean, there have been some good changes even since Reagan, but in recent years, it's been going in a different direction. And when you see tanks in the streets of Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. for no reason whatsoever, then you have to start to worry about just exactly what the leadership of our country has in mind in terms of the perpetuation of democracy. I hate to sound too negative. I hate to be too alarmist. But did you ever think you would see U.S. tanks in D.C.? I mean, for no reason? He says, "Oh,
I've been predicting this. I've been predicting this for 25 years, David. I've been trying to tell you for better part of 20 years that this is where America was headed, and you would argue and argue and argue. I could see it as an historian. I could see the signs of the fragmentation. And I know from history that it never ends well. It always ends in civil war. And the signs have been so evident to me as an outsider, looking at it objectively with a historical lens on it, that was the inevitable outcome of where this was leading. Unless somebody came along and managed to turn it around, and that's still possible, but increasingly unlikely, I think, that anyone can change the vector that it's headed on.
well,
There are just too many historical precedents that we can talk about till the cows come home, right?
oh yeah, yeah. Well, yes and no, Cameron. I mean, excuse me. I mean, when Biden beat Trump, he managed to get things turned around pretty nicely. He appointed a whole bunch of very good judges. He got laws passed that were moving us forward on climate change and excuse me, electrification, and job creation. He passed a lot of important infrastructure, expanding Amtrak rail system, and so on. He got a lot of stuff passed through Congress that were moving us in the right direction. And had Trump not managed to win re-election, largely because of the price of eggs symbolically. I mean, so many people just voted, on inflation and other things and immigration, that was a big issue obviously as well. Uh, and he managed to pull off, frankly, a stunning victory. I think in part because America is still not ready to have a woman president, which is just absurd in my opinion. But I think that's one significant part of it. I think the perception that the economy was bad, even though by all economic indicators it was getting much better under Biden. And I posted this constantly. The numbers on even inflation was going down, jobs were going up, everything you can think of was improving. And even immigration was going down in the last 2 years or so of Biden's administration. But Biden was old and probably should have gotten out sooner or stayed in and toughed it out. It's hard to say which would have been better. But Harris came in with 110 days left or so, which is not very much to form a campaign, even if you are a sitting vice president. Uh, and and we all know what happened, and so we'll see if we can get Trump out and if we can win back the Congress. I think after 2 terms of Trump, that there still will be time to get us back on the right course, both in terms of environmental and infrastructure things that we need to move forward, uh, and also in terms of preserving our democracy and maybe putting in some more safeguards. But another 4 or 8 years of a Trump wannabe, a J.D. Vance, and by the way, parenthetically, I've always been proud of my name, James David Markham, until I find out that JD stands for James David. So I share 2 names with Vance, and I'm not any too happy about it, I can tell you. But I mean, if someone like him gets in and manages to stay in 4, especially 8 years, between judicial appointments and other things, I really do worry very seriously about where American democracy is going. Now, as we said earlier in the podcast here, I turned 80 this year, so I don't know how much of the future I'm going to be around to see. I took a little test online that predicting your longevity, and it purported to. They had disclaimers. This is not real, but don't bet the farm on it. But it did also purport to have some scientific basis, and I had to inform Edna that according to that, I am scheduled to live to age 104. And she groaned massively when she heard that, of course. But I'm not counting on that. But I could have anywhere from 10 to 20 years left, I suppose. And if I have 10 years left, I'll see a good part of where what direction we're going to be heading in. But I will admit, my friend, and I feel good that you are safe down under, and I'm safe at least for now in Canada. I don't think much is going to come of the idea that he's going to annex Canada, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah, I guess the difference, perhaps, between our views of what's happening in the United States is I don't think it's about Trump. I never have. I remember when, Chrissy and I first got together nearly 20 years
Mhm.
ago, you know, it was still um, the last years of the Bush two regime, and she was very happy when Obama got elected and Bush was out. And I remember saying to her at the time, "Wait till you see what comes next." You think Bush is the problem. Bush isn't the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. The problem is structural, and this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And I think the same is true of Trump or Vance. They're not the problem. They are symptoms of the problem. The problem is deeper, it's structural, and you don't fix structural problems by focusing on the guy in the office. The guy in the office is just a symptom, and no one is addressing the underlying structural problems. It's a bit like we could, if you take it out of that, if you talk about the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council, people bitch and moan to me all the time about how weak and toothless the Security Council is. And I go, well, that's because of the way it was structured.
Right.
It was set up to fail from the get-go after World War II. With the veto system, it was never gonna work. I mean, there's a lot to be said
Sure.
for it. I'm a big fan of the United Nations. I'm a big fan of the idea of the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it was implemented poorly, and in its 70-odd year history, they've never had the incentives to fix the structural issues with it, so it just continues to malfunction. And I think the same is true of United States' domestic politics and also international politics. And, as an international citizen, my biggest concern and frustration and criticisms of the United States have been about how it conducts itself internationally. And that has been true regardless of which party happened to hold power. It's the way it conducts itself as an international citizen that I take most issue with. And again, it's for purely structural reasons. It's about the industrial military complex and how that is really what runs the United States' geopolitical strategy, as well as domestic political strategy to a large extent, because it needs the domestic politics to continue to support what it's doing globally. So it makes sure that the people that get elected are people that are friendly to its international hegemony goals, which unfortunately it's been able to get away with. Less and less so, though. I mean, I think China has positioned itself very well to capitalize on the decline of the United States as a global authority and a global power. Whether or not that will be a good thing or a bad thing, time will tell.
Well, I think so far time would indicate that it would not be a good thing. Getting back to your comment,
Really?
yeah, I'm not.
Like, why?
I'm not a big fan of the Chinese government right now. The Chinese people and the Chinese culture, I've got no problem with at all. But
what has the Chinese government done that you're not a fan of?
well, I don't know. We have a whole lot of time to go into all these side things, but they tend to be very aggressive in the military expansion. They're being very aggressive.
Compared to how many bases do they have over the
I've
world?
been in Southeast Asia, and the people I talk to there are very upset with China and very concerned.
Okay, let's just forget about the people you talk to. How many military bases does China have around the world?
Well, I have no idea.
Compared to America's,
No, America has
the United
more, of
States has
course.
800 military bases. How many does China have?
I have no idea how many bases China has, but there's a lot more to expansionism than just having military bases.
So what kind of military aggression has China been guilty of?
Oh, they are being very intimidating toward military operations around Taiwan. They have been known to
Taiwan is part of China. Everyone agrees that.
Obviously
that's
don't-
been international policy since the 70s.
not ever.
They can't be militarily aggressive to their own country.
No, but they have been.
Taiwan is China.
They threatened.
Taiwan is China.
They threatened to invade it, and yes, the Taiwanese would.
They can't invade your own
The
country.
Taiwanese would disagree with you that they are China. Okay.
No, they wouldn't actually. It's actually part of the Taiwanese constitution that they are China.
At any rate,
They agree in the one China policy. They just think that they are the real China.
okay. Well, okay. If you want to look at it from that point of view, sure. But
The United States agrees that in the one China policy, always has done. Australia acknowledges the one China policy. Everyone acknowledges
they
the one China
they do
policy.
not acknowledge that Taiwan is not its independent self. They don't believe that China has any right to take over Taiwan. The fact of the matter is that the military forces of China are expanding, and they're becoming more aggressive toward other ships in the South China Sea and elsewhere. And you hear about this all the time. Anyway, getting back to American politics, so you were saying, when Obama, was elected, that Chrissy was very pleased, and you said, "Don't worry, it's going to only get worse." Yes and no, because yes, it got worse when Trump was elected after 8 years of Obama, but then it got better when Biden was elected. And if Biden's legacy had gone forward, you would not be seeing tanks in the streets. You would not be seeing efforts to rig the elections. You would be seeing more movement toward protecting voting rights, and appointing more judges who will protect democracy, than you're seeing now. So if Democrats can come back after this last 4 years of Bush, of Trump, assuming that he leaves office. He tried not to once, and he may very well try
It's a
not
big
to.
assumption.
He may not to try not to again. So
He can't afford to.
yeah,
What I've been arguing is he can't afford to leave office. He knows what's going to happen if he leaves office. Like he barely kept himself out of jail the last time he left office. If he leaves office again, it's a bit like the analogy that I use for our audiences all the time. It's Caesar crossing the Rubicon. I mean, Caesar knew what was going to happen if he did what he was supposed to do and give up his command in Gaul and go back to Rome as a private citizen. He knew what was going to happen, and he couldn't afford to let that happen. So, he rolled the dice and crossed the Rubicon. And I think Trump knows what's going to happen if he ever leaves office. He can't afford for that to happen. And he's not unintelligent. I mean, we can argue about how his brain works, but he's not a stupid guy,
no.
and the people around him aren't stupid people. So he understands obviously the implications if he's not in power, or friends of his aren't in power. So I don't like the way that this plays out from
Well,
here.
I agree. Although I will say the Supreme Court has given him such broad immunity. Anything he does in an official capacity is legal, and that makes it a lot more difficult for any federal charges against him for what he has done, when he was in office. Now, if he's violated state laws, that's a different thing. That's not covered by that immunity, and also if his successor were to pardon him, it wouldn't protect him from state or local charges. But I agree. It's if he stays in power, or they play some trick where he runs for vice president, and so on. I don't think constitutionally that would pass muster, but he hasn't paid that much attention to the Constitution so far, so why would he start now?
Yeah.
I think that there could be problems, but I think I have enough faith that he will end up having to leave office, that he will not be able to stay. I don't have as much faith that we will elect a Democrat. And I'm not convinced that will happen, although Trump's numbers are getting more and more underwater, and we may very well do quite well in the midterms. On special elections at the state and even federal level, and Supreme Court level, as state Supreme Courts, the Democrats have done very well. But that's not a predictor of what will happen in the next main election, which is next year. We'll see. Traditionally, if there's any problem with the popularity of the president, they'll lose the House of Representatives. And so we may very well take back the House.
You're assuming there will be midterms.
Well, that's, again, the hope. The assumption.
Yeah, I think that's a big assumption.
I agree. The assumption I make is that it's likely there will be midterms, not that there will be midterms. I mean, that's how worried I am. I'm not prepared to say it's a definite go. You know.
But getting back to you know, um, the partisan viewpoint that you have, I think, is part of the issue with the United States. You think things were great under Obama and Biden, not great under Bush and Trump. And it's that kind of partisanship that I think is essential. I think, I love you, but I think you're part of the problem. That kind of red blue partisanship is the issue in the United States. What I'm trying to say is that it's the structural issues that brought Trump and MAGA into the position of power that they hold. And the structural issues weren't fixed by the Obama administration. They weren't addressed by the Biden administration. When the Democrats are in power, they don't address the structural issues that are the problem in the United States, because at the end of the day, the Democrats are run just as much by the industrial military complex, corporate power, as the Republicans are. They have slightly different goals and they're slightly more progressive in some areas, but they don't address the underlying structural issues of late stage capitalism, which is what the United States is suffering from. And those structural issues, even when you have Democrats in power, just continue to get worse because they don't address them. And the Democrats, people like yourself, unfortunately, let the Democrats get away with it and turn a blind eye to it because of partisan politics. You're all happy and you won't criticize anything the Biden administration does. You won't criticize anything the Obama administration does, because if it's the blue team, they're the good guys. It's this good guys versus bad guys mentality, which I think is part of the problem. That is the core issue: is my team versus your team.
Well, we're getting low on time, but I have to disagree with you. I'm critical of the Democratic Party, and I've been critical of Biden and of Obama on some things. Sometimes I criticize the Democrats because they get so woke, if you will, that they ignore the needs and feelings of working class Americans, which used to be the core base of the Democratic Party. Under Biden, he tried to get some changes through to be more promotive of democracy, but the Republicans in the Senate would block it because of the filibuster. You can get some things through in what's called a reconciliation process for a budget. Some budget items through without the filibuster being usable. But for most things, including the infrastructure bill, they had to tailor it in such a way that they could get the 7 or 8 or so Republican senators to go along with it so they could hit that 60 vote threshold and pass it over the objections of the other 40. So it's sometimes just because there's a Democrat, or for that matter, a Republican in the White House, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get their way completely unless they have really big majority, and especially in the Senate where they have the filibuster rule. So, again, if Kamala Harris had been elected, and let's say we had eight years of her, there's a very good chance things would be a lot better than they are now, and they will be if we continue to have MAGA people in power. And to deny that is to deny reality. To say that it doesn't matter if a Democrat or Republican is in power is to ignore the huge differences in what they did. I'm sure you're a believer in trying to fight climate change. Imagine the differences between Trump saying he wants to go back to beautiful coal and expand oil and gas production, whereas Obama and Biden were pushing for solar and wind and other renewable and ultimately cheaper and very reliable sources of energy, and increasing the fuel consumption requirements for automobiles and pushing them to become eventually electric, or at the very least hybrid, which is exactly the opposite of what Trump and the Republicans are trying to do. Just on this one issue alone, the difference is spectacular between them. And how you can
Yeah,
deny
but
that, I don't know.
I'm not denying that. I'm saying that they're not addressing the structural issues that are the problem. Anyway, I do have to go.
I know.
I've got to get to a kung fu class.
Well,
This was
oh
fun.
yes,
We
it
should do
was.
this.
It was very
We're
fun.
just getting started. We should do this at least once a
Well,
month. I want to
as
have
soon as you shifted
a political debate with you once a
as
month.
soon as you shifted from talking about Napoleon and my books and the movie and that sort of thing to politics, I knew number one we were doomed, and number two we
No,
were
this
never
is
going
the
to have
best
enough
bit.
time to fix it, to finish it. But no,
Yeah.
if you want to get together once a month, my friend, I will be more than delighted. Possible exceptions if I'm on a month-long trip somewhere in Europe, but even then, I can probably find some way if I remember to pack these these now quite antiquated items that I'm wearing here, a microphone and headphones. But I actually got headphones like yours, and I probably have a microphone with them. But I use these things so seldom that when all of a sudden, oh, we're doing this thing today, so I just go with the old standby. I'll try to come into the 21st century next time we do this. But it's
Uh,
wonderful. It's
hey,
wonderful to see you and to hear your
yeah,
voice. I
you
mean,
too.
I mean, people have to remember, we agree on a lot of Napoleonic stuff. We disagree on a lot of American politics and stuff, but we've been friends for 20 years now, I guess, and hopefully we'll be friends for 20 more.
Great to see you. Give my love to Edna. Let's
And
talk
to
soon.
Christy, you got it, my friend. Take care. Thanks again. Bye bye.